begin with an immigration overhaul. The president is set to unveil his sweeping new plan in a Rose Garden speech today. This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. In the next hour at the White House, President Trump will lay out his proposed changes to fix the nation's immigration system. He's expected to call for beefing up border security, seeking a dramatic change to the nation's green card system instead of favoring relatives of people already inside the United States. The proposed changes would give priority to those with high-level skills, degrees, and job offers. White House press secretary is urging Democrats to be part of the solution, not the problem.
We want to move to this merit-based system. Democrats right now, unless they get on board with this, the only thing they've said they want is open borders. I think that is a terrible thing for our country, and I think it's a terrible message for them going into 2020. So I think it would be wonderful to watch them get on board with something that helps secure our border.
So before we see it, what might be in it? Chief White House correspondent John Roberts from the North Lawn. John.
Harris, good afternoon to you. I can tell you almost exactly what will be in it because we got the briefing yesterday. What the president wants to do is change the United States system of legal immigration. This is not dealing with illegal migrants, legal immigration, the green card system, from primarily a family-based system. 66% of people who come into this country on a visa right now come in on a family basis. He wants to put the emphasis on employment and skills. Let's put the numbers up so that you can see. Right now, only 12% of people come in on employment and skill level. He wants to change that to 57%, cut families from 66 to 33%, and then reserve 10% of the green cards for humanitarian or other grounds. But the president will end, he's proposing to, end the visa lottery program. The president wants to create a sort of a Build America visa that would highlight extraordinary talent, professional and specialized vocations, and exceptional students who come to this country to get educated but then leave. He'd like them to stay in the country. Those visas will be awarded on a points basis, and points will be based on age, English proficiency, an offer of employment above a certain wage threshold, and educational and vocational certifications. The Council of Economic Advisors believes that making this change will actually increase productivity and GDP, because right now, legal immigrants' average income in the United States is $43,000 a year. For those who come in on an education and skills-based level, that's $126,000 a year. So if you change the percentages, it would raise the average income of legal migrants to this country to $96,000 a year. That would boost GDP and raise revenue. Now, what this plan does not deal with is the so-called dreamers, the DACA recipients, or 11 million other people who are in this country without proper documentation. But what the White House wants to do is rally Republicans around a plan that they can then later try to take to Congress. And Lindsey Graham believes that this plan could possibly do that.
I think it will unite Republicans, and that's a good step. We all realize you got to deal with the 11 million to get Democrats on board. But having a unified front on merit-based immigration to keep the economy humming and border security is a good place to start.
So what about the Democrats? Well, if Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal is any indication, this plan ain't going nowhere. Listen here.
This sham proposal is dead on arrival. It is a mockery of what America means. Neither Donald Trump's grandfather nor my father would be able to come to America under this proposal. It is such a despicable abdication of moral authority by the President of the United States.
Blumenthal clearly not a fan. Democrats do agree that the immigration system is broken and needs to be fixed. They just say this is not the way to do it. Now, the White House is saying, Harris, it would like to get agreement from Congress on an immigration bill before the election, but this really reads more like an election platform issue for the president and Republicans in 2020. Harris?
All right. John Roberts, thank you very much. I want to bring in now California Congressman Devin Nunes, ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee and also a member of Ways and Means. Great to have you on the program today. Let's start with what is in this bill and what isn't. Did Democrats just miss an opportunity to get maybe DACAs and Dreamers into legislation when they wouldn't do a deal last year?
Well, they've continued to, and I think that's one of the things that needs to get out there that the media needs to cover, that a party like the Democrats who talk about the Dreamers so much, they still have yet to put together any type of comprehensive plan. So they didn't vote for our bill last year. We got about 180 Republicans on a bill that voted for a bill that was on the floor of the House of Representatives. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see the Democrats who control this body, I'd like to see them put a bill on the floor that's comprehensive, that deals with border security, that deals with the work permit systems that we need, and not just criticize the president. At some point, they're in power. They're not just a party that can criticize anymore, because the president cannot legislate, right? Only the Congress can create laws. And it needs to start here in the House. You've seen on the Senate side they have proposals. On the House side we have yet to see anything.
You know, I'm wondering if politically we aren't at a time. I mean, I know it's the year of 2020 in the presidential campaign, but are we stuck in a gear of not even doing what you can until you can do better overall on the Hill?
I think we are stuck in a time where the two parties are so separated. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but we're also in a time when the media is actually responsible for this too. So you have most of the mainstream media who are sitting right here in this building, surrounding me right now, who don't hold them accountable, right? So why would you not be putting a microphone into Nancy Pelosi's face and the Democrat leadership's face and say, okay, you don't like the president's plan, got it. Where's your plan? But you don't see that happening.
All right, I want to move on here to the next topic because I'm going to lose you in a few minutes. The Department of Justice missing a deadline yesterday to turn over the full unredacted Mueller report to the House Intel Committee, and now House Democrats are holding a 12-hour public reading of the lesser redacted version of the report. Yeah. What is happening?
Well, I'm glad they're reading it into the record, because what I call the Mueller report is the Mueller dossier. It's a fantasy. And in fact, anybody who pays, the American people paid nearly $40 million for the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world, the FBI, who was working under the direction of the Mueller dossier team, and they supported this with news stories. Now, I'm sorry, I don't pay the FBI or the Mueller dossier team to go out and just get news stories to support their information. So, the fact that we didn't even know or the FBI didn't even know or never bothered to tell the FISA court that there was no Russian consulate in Miami, that's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, it's almost, and they had to have known this. So, why wouldn't they talk about Christopher Steele and how the Democrats paid for it and all the problems with it? So I have zero confidence in this Mueller dossier. Why they want to read it on the House floor, I don't know, but it'll be a nice fiction-type reading on the House floor.
Real quickly about the missing, though, of the deadline and the White House turning over documents. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, look, the documents that I want are the documents that underlie the Mueller dossier, the Mueller report.
So what's next in getting them?
I'm not in, so I guess, they've subpoenaed it, so I guess they could try holding someone in contempt. I mean, that would be their next step. But, we're not in favor of that. Remember, the House leadership, the Gang of Eight, and others have access to go read the Mueller dossier in its entirety. Okay, so remember that. So the people that are criticizing this haven't even went to read it yet.
And the House Intel Committee also then subpoenaing the DOJ. What's the next step in that?
Well, it would be the same course of action that the Judiciary Committee took, right? So if they want to move to contempt on the floor, that's up to them. It's not going to have the support of any Republicans, I can tell you that.
All right. Devin Nunes today joining us, the ranking member. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So we want to get some reaction from the other side of the aisle, and you can bet these two men know each other, Congressman Dan Kildee and the ranking member, Devin Nunes. And so as we get them into position right now, I'm always very transparent about this as well. And in addition to that, we're waiting also to hear from the President of the United States a little bit later today on rolling out his immigration plan, which is where Congressman Nunes and I first began. Okay, across from the political aisle, Democrat Dan Kildee, the Michigan congressman, a member of the Ways and Means Committee, the panel seeking the President's tax returns. So we've just talked with Congressman Nunes about documents, and now we're talking about tax returns. What is the next step in all of this?
Well, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee has issued a subpoena to enforce his authority under the IRS Code, Section 6103. I have heard from the chairman, and he's been very focused on this. He intends to pursue every avenue to enforce the subpoena. So my expectation is just from the signals that we're getting, that the administration will continue to resist. And in all likelihood, ultimately, this will be resolved the way disputes between the two branches should be resolved, and that is by the judicial system. That's what our framers intended when there's disagreement. That's why we have the separation of powers, and that's why the judiciary is in place. I expect that's where it ends up.
May I ask you just some basic questions? Because, you know, there isn't a law that says you have to turn over your tax returns. And there is an expectation for anyone who turns over things to the IRS of privacy. I'm curious about the law there, too. So let's start with who turns over tax returns and why.
Well, the question is who turns over tax returns to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee or the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. And that law has been on the books. There is a law that's been on the books since 1924 and has been used regularly. Of course, it hasn't been used to access the returns of the president,
right?
Because presidents since 1973 have voluntarily released those records. The president promised that he would do that. Obviously, he's not yet done that. So, yes, people do have the right and the expectation of privacy, but the president of the United States, who is a public officer, who has responsibilities to the Constitution that trump his own interests, I think is still subject to Section 6103. It has to be used carefully, has to be used judiciously, should be used for a legitimate legislative purpose, and I think the chairman has made it very clear that that's his approach.
Congressman, can you understand why when maybe a voting public looks at this and they see that it's a presidential election year, that it makes it very dicey or sticky or even politically risky to go after a president over and over on the same issue?
Well, yeah, first of all, it's not the presidential election year yet. We've got 18 months.
Oh, you didn't hear that it started? I mean,
you know,
people are coming out in your party like there's food on the table.
And I am of the view that we should not decide that in the second half of a presidency that we just stop doing our jobs. I really think we start these elections far too early. You look at what happens in other parts of the world, they have a little more patience before they begin their political process, and I think that hurts us. I really do. And I think both parties bear responsibility for that. But for me personally, I just refuse to bend to the idea that everything has to stop when we get into what feels often like the silly season.
All right. Immigration plan coming out from the president in the next couple of hours, and some details on that off the top of this hour. We're learning more and more. What's your take on what you've learned?
Well, I'm anxious to see more of the detail. Some of it, I think, gives us the basis for a further conversation. I think the president's willingness to invest in technology at our ports of entry is a good step. I do think we're going to probably find some disagreement over the way we prioritize immigration, but that's a conversation that we should be willing to have through the legislative process. I hope this is an opportunity to begin a conversation about DACA. I know the president left that out. And a couple of the...
He didn't last time, though.
Pardon me?
He didn't last time he offered up a deal. And it had even more than just the dreamers. It cut into those 11 million or so who were here illegally without the proper documentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes the point that both parties need to come together around a comprehensive immigration approach. We did that in 2013 in the Senate.
You think that can happen now? I know you're optimistic that a lot can happen even in a presidential year.
Look, the jobs that we are elected to requires us to continue to be optimistic that we're going to find common ground. I find it really difficult when before the discussion even starts that members of both parties, and sadly even somewhat Mr. Nunes, sort of dismiss the idea that the Democrats might have some ideas to offer or that Republicans might have ideas that would be attractive to us. Let's leave open at least the slim possibility that we can find common ground. Sometimes lightning strikes, and we have to let that happen if we can.
Very positive and optimistic today from Congressman Dan Kildee. Great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alabama's governor has signed the most restrictive anti-abortion bill in the nation, calling for a re-examination of Roe versus Wade. Could this end up all the way at the U.S. Supreme Court? And tensions rising as an Iranian military official says a full-scale confrontation may be on the way. At what point does Congress need to step in? Senator Rick Scott of the Armed Services Committee joins me next. All abortions statewide, the move now setting up a potential challenge to Roe versus Wade in the U.S. Supreme Court. Jonathan Siri following the story for us from Atlanta. Jonathan?
Harris, in fact, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood say they're already planning a legal challenge to block Alabama's law from before it takes effect in 6 months from now. Late yesterday, Republican Governor Kay Ivey signed a bill making it a Class A felony for doctors to provide abortions, except in cases where the woman's life is in danger. The new law makes no exceptions for rape or incest and is scheduled to take effect in 6 months. The governor explained in a written statement, many Americans, myself included, disagreed when Roe v. Wade was handed down in 1973. The sponsors of this bill believe that it's time once again for the U.S. Supreme Court to revisit this important matter, and they believe this act may bring about the best opportunity for this to occur. Well, the ACLU responded to Ivey's action, saying by signing this bill, the governor and her colleagues in the state legislature have decided to waste millions in Alabama taxpayer dollars in order to defend a bill that is simply a political effort to overturn 46 years of precedent that has followed the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. We will not allow that to happen, and we will see them in court. Presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand spoke at an abortion rights roundtable and press conference at the State House in Georgia, where Governor Brian Kemp signed abortion restrictions into law last week.
We need to call this what it is, a nationwide assault on women's constitutional rights by ideological extremists.
So as you can imagine, abortion becoming a major issue heading into the 2020 presidential campaign, and these state laws, you see them galvanizing support on both sides of the abortion issue. Harris?
Jonathan Siri, thank you. Video of the aftermath now to show you after a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River near New York City yesterday. Partially sank right near a busy heliport after that, and the pilot rescued from the water, not seriously injured, we're told. No other people were on board, and there's no immediate word of what caused that crash.
He couldn't have been airborne for more than like 15 seconds. He kind of just came up, like stuck a little bit, spun, went right back down. I thought he was doing tricks at first. I thought he was like, it was like a private ride or something, and he was like doing some tricks for people, but then it just kind of went down and crashed.
Wow. Authorities say a person at the helipad suffered minor injuries while trying to get out of the way. And a Fox News alert here, President Trump telling reporters he hopes rising tensions with Iran don't lead to all-out war. This as an Iranian military official warns his troops that a, quote, full-scale confrontation is possible. Earlier today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders laid out the current strategy.
We are continuing to stay focused primarily on the safety and security of the American people. We have taken steps to move some of the diplomatic corps out of areas that we see they need to come from as we see the threat level go up. We continue to be vigilant. What we'd ultimately like to see is a behavioral change from Iran, and we're going to continue the maximum pressure campaign until we see that happen.
Joining me now, Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Good to have you on the program. Thank you. We're hearing calls from even those within your own party. Senator Lindsey Graham, one of them. What does the White House know, and who are they sharing it with among those on the Hill? What's the latest on that?
Well, Harris, I read the intelligence briefing this morning. It's classified, so I can't repeat what's in there.
Understandably.
Harris, let's think about this. This is a country that chants death to America. They're trying to create nuclear weapons. They want to eliminate Israel. So when you think about that, we have to take this seriously. I'm glad that the president does not want to have his first option going to war. None of us do. But we have to defend Americans. We have to defend American allies. And we have to take these things seriously.
When you hear about preparation for an all-out confrontation coming from the Iranian side, what's your reaction?
Well, I served in the United States Navy, so the first thing you think about is, and you think about, none of us want to throw people into a conflict we don't have to. The Iranians have got to come to their senses, be part of a civilized world. Why do they want to be in a position that they want to destabilize the world? So, but I know we've got the most lethal military in the world. American assets will do better than any other military in the world. And I would tell the Iranians, I would not pick a fight with Americans.
And the threat,
but hopefully that won't happen.
It's my understanding the threat is always there anyway, because they're always calling for death to Israel or death to America. But this came with specificity in terms of our U.S. assets. I want to get to this poll, which shows, it's a new Fox News poll, which shows a 33% group of registered voters approve of the handling that President Trump has of the situation with Iran. That is more than either of the groups who say he's either too tough or not tough enough. So American people, according to this poll, they think the president's getting it right.
Well, look, the president's standing up to Iran. Obama and the Democrats did the reckless Iran deal. The president did the right thing by walking away from that. Let's remember, Iran's not our ally. And plus, they're trying to create another Syria in South America with what they're doing in Venezuela, where they're part of the Maduro regime, which is basically starving young children to death. So, Iran has got to come to their senses. The president's trying to hold them accountable. We need to support the president in what he's trying to do.
And what has changed since we pulled out of that deal that's a positive for us?
There is nothing. They are still a state sponsor of terrorism. They were before. They've not changed their actions. They didn't leave Venezuela. So there's nothing positive that's happening. And so I'm glad the president's taking this seriously. I'm glad that his first reaction is not military, but clearly has to be on the table to defend Americans and our ally, especially Israel.
Senator Rick Scott, great to see you today. Thank you for your time.
Nice seeing you, Harris.
In just about an hour from now, President Trump is expected to unveil his sweeping immigration reform plan. So, what do Border Patrol agents want to hear from him? We're talking to the agency's union vice president next. And new information about the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California state history, who officials are now blaming for last year's Camp Fire. President Trump announcing his plan to overhaul the nation's immigration system in a Rose Garden speech in about an hour from now. One of the central planks we know of, a proposed merit-based system that would place higher priority on those with high skill levels in education instead of favoring relatives of people already in the United States. William Lajeunesse has more from San Ysidro, California, the busiest land border crossing in the nation, with a look at which groups will be affected by the planned overhaul. William?
Well, Harris, the U.S. gets about 2 million immigrants each year. I break it down to make it easy in about 3 categories. You have illegal immigrants who come over that fence. You have asylum seekers who did that or come through the port of entry. And then you have legal immigrants, often known as legal permanent residents, LPRs. They wait overseas, over the border. Then they get their green card. And then after 5 years, they can apply to have their relatives, spouse, children, parents come over. By some accounts, one legal foreign worker can result in about 200 different migrants. That's why the president calls it legal, or rather chain migration. Let's talk with San Ysidro, the port of entry, busiest, 20,000 people, 70,000 cars a day. The president wants to harden that. Now, we got all those cars, 70,000 vehicles. Well, some of those are filled with drugs. Some bring in illegal immigrants. Only some of those trucks are x-rayed. Otherwise, you have some dogs. The president wants every car, every person to be screened. Also, asylum seekers. Some make their claim south of the border. The president wants them to remain in Mexico. And if they are detained here, he wants them to stay in custody until they're adjudicated, at least 60 days. Then you have the biggest change in legal immigration. As you said, replace chain migration with a merit system, which could dramatically change the demography of who gets in here. Right now, the census says about 25% of all living in poverty in the U.S. are immigrant or their child. Half are on Medicaid or uninsured, and another half, someone in that household is using a welfare program. Right now, the top 3 sending countries of legal immigrants, Mexico, India, and China, that would change dramatically. 66% come in on blood based on the preferences because they are a child or a spouse or brother or sister. Only 12% based on skill. The president wants to invert that number and bring more based in on what they can offer the U.S. labor market, not by chance.
To stop the visa lottery program where they take lottery systems and a country will put you into a lottery and then deposit you into the United States. I don't think most countries are giving us their finest.
So the legal immigration system has not been changed since 1990, Harris. Many are puzzled a little bit because right now the crisis at the border, as you know, has to deal most with asylum seekers. Democrats say this plan is a non-starter. Republicans call it a first step. We will see. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you very much. For more on this, I want to bring in Hector Garza. He is the vice president of the National Border Patrol Council and himself a Border Patrol agent. Good to see you today. As we learn more about this plan, what impresses you in terms of how it will impact the Border Patrol?
So first of all, I want to make it very clear, Harris, that we've lost control of the border as we are right now. And we have to make sure that we do come up with a plan. And even though we have not gotten all the details on President Trump's plan, our president of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd, will be having a phone conference with the White House staff later today, and we will be getting more details. However, as Border Patrol agents, we will support language or plans or bills or legislation that will actually achieve border security. As it is right now, we're having a very hard time on the border, and we support some of the actions by Senator Lindsey Graham, and we want to make sure that we do support some of the actions that President Trump is trying to achieve in order to secure the border.
Well, and I understand that Senator Lindsey Graham's plan primarily deals with the issue of asylum and all of the questions around that, and that needs to be addressed because until you start to send a lot more judges to the border to get through that asylum process, people are just lining up waiting with a whole lot of questions. You said something, though, that caught my attention, and I wrote it down. You said we've lost control of the border. That is different from what reporting I've seen. I mean, I know the numbers of illegals are burgeoning and families that they're finding at the border coming across. But what do you mean when you say you've lost control?
So our Border Patrol chief has mentioned that over 50% of our agents are not securing the border, and they're now actually processing, transporting, and caring for some of these asylum seekers. But I would challenge that percentage. I would put that percentage somewhere in the range of 75%, because what we're seeing is that we're not securing the border. We're not out there catching those drug dealers, those drug smugglers, those human smugglers. As a matter of fact, just last week in Laredo, Texas, we stopped a semi-trailer at one of our border checkpoints that was smuggling 120 people from 5 different countries. That means that more people are entering the country illegally. Thank God that our agents were able to stop that smuggling event. But we're getting overrun at the border, not just in the humanitarian crisis, but just on the border in general when dealing with these drug smugglers and human smugglers. So yeah, we've lost control of the border, Harris.
It's something that our viewers will hear me say often, has to do with the number that keeps growing of the openings, the job openings, north of 2,000 for several months now in the Border Patrol. How do you deal with that, and what impact can you see maybe the president's plan or someone else is making on that issue?
Again, we do support what the president is doing. We do have to review this bill to see what's actually in there. But we do have confidence in President Trump. And we're asking President Trump and members of Congress to lead on this issue and to please come up with a solution. We need the help on the border. Now, we do have a big problem with Border Patrol agents staying on the job. Unfortunately, we are about 2,000 agents undermanned on the border. And it's just very difficult to keep our agents working for Border Patrol. The conditions of a Border Patrol agent, the job of a Border Patrol agent is very, very difficult. You're working in very remote locations. You're working sometimes with radios that don't work. You can't call for backup. You're working in the middle of the ranches. And now you throw this crisis on top of all this mess. And no, it's very difficult to retain our Border Patrol agents. And in order to achieve border security, we're going to need that wall that President Trump is trying to get us. We're going to need technology, but most importantly, we're going to need that manpower, but we're going to have to retain our Border Patrol agents.
I was taking notes. Border is a serious detention or retention issues and detention issues, both of them. Hector Garza, we'll bring you back as we continue to learn more about what's in the president's plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harris.
California officials are now blaming Pacific Gas and Electric for the deadliest and most destructive fire in state history. Investigators are saying it was the utility company's electrical lines that sparked the flames. Jonathan Hunt on the story from Los Angeles. Jonathan?
Harris, the bottom line, 85 people died because of a spark from an electrical transmission line. That is the stark and stunning conclusion of investigators who've spent months determining what caused the Camp Fire, as it was called, the most deadly in California's history.
our job is to lives and property of the citizens of California. I would say just as utilities, they've seen the devastation that electrical or failure of a utility can cause. I think it's really just a statewide, hey, this is a major fire that we have determined was caused by a utility.
The campfire sparked on November 8th, sending flames racing through the town of Paradise, scorching 153,000 acres, destroying 19,000 homes, offices, and other buildings, and sending terrified residents who had little or no warning running for their lives.
Are they coming for us? Come on. Watch out, watch out.
PG&E could yet face criminal charges and has already filed for bankruptcy protection in the wake of losses and scores of lawsuits filed by those who lost everything, their homes, their loved ones, their pets, their treasured photographs. The utility company's new chief executive, Bill Johnson, told state lawmakers it was a, quote, disappointment this happened, and said, quote, I will tell you we will be laser focused on safety, but I won't expect you to believe that until you see the results. The outcomes for the people, the citizens, the customers have to be better. Now, Harris, our producer Mike Lundeen, who's based in Northern California, tells me today that large parts of Paradise are still essentially uninhabitable, still a picture of post-apocalyptic ruins. That electrical spark, in other words, turned Paradise into hell.
Wow.
Harris?
Jonathan Hunt, thank you very much. If you have never seen the Statue of Liberty, it's time to go. A brand new attraction opening today on Liberty Island. I like to say freedom has a destination. Next. Toddler has been found safe after spending 3 nights in the elements. Police say rescue crews found 22-month-old Kenneth Howard on a 50-foot cliff on an old mine property more than a quarter mile from his home. His family says they think Kenneth must have walked out the back door Sunday night. The toddler was taken to a nearby hospital for evaluation. We're told he's going to be okay. They heard him crying, by the way. That's how they found him. Little one. Today marks the grand opening of a brand new museum at the the Statue of Liberty, I should say, dedicated to its history and the impact of the iconic structure has had on the entire world. It's also the home for the statue's original torch. Laura Engel at one of my favorite places on the planet, the home of freedom. Laura?
Yes. Hi, Harris. Well, indeed, it is a day of celebration for all that worked so hard over the last 2 years to see this museum get open today. And, of course, there was a ribbon cutting, and it was a wonderful day. And I want to show you here, the Statue of Liberty Museum was actually built just right on the other side of the island where Lady Liberty stands. I had to show you this shot to show you how close the museum is to the Statue of Liberty. Over $100 million to complete the 3 gallery spaces inside that contain 150 artifacts in all. Now, this is a very unique looking structure, too. The publicly funded project, which cost $100 million and contains 3 gallery spaces, showcases those glass walls and a copper-colored roof, which appear to be rising out of the earth. The museum is the biggest addition to the area around the Statue of Liberty since she was first unveiled in 1886. Inside, the original torch, as you mentioned, that Lady Liberty carried, serves as the museum's centerpiece, which some might remember was replaced in the 80s because it leaked. Museum curators say they hope all of the artifacts will serve as a reminder of the statue's symbolism of liberty and freedom.
It stands for a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But that's the beauty of it, the magic of it, is that people can put their beliefs behind the Statue of Liberty.
Other key features inside the museum is life-size copper replica of Lady Liberty's face, her foot, and visitors will also hear recordings of immigrants remembering the moment they first laid eyes on the statue as they approached the United States, which one immigrant called thrilling. Liberty Island receives 4.5 million visitors every year, and up until now, the museum was inside the pedestal, but only 20% of visitors were allowed inside due to post-9/11 security concerns. Some great news, Harris, the admission is included in the price of your ferry ticket. So now everybody who comes onto the island will have a chance to go inside, experience those artifacts, and hear the history of the statue and those who built it. Back to you.
Wow, that's a great value, by the way. I mean, my kids and I, we go every summer. We love to go. And you can get a picture taken if somebody will take it with you standing under like one of the toes of the foot. I mean, there's a lot.
That's right.
There's a lot to see. So
just go around.
Quick question for you, because there's an interactive kids museum down there. There's a lot going on. When you talk about the ferries, they can get pretty crowded. Do you have any idea how far in advance you can get stuff, like tickets to go?
I think that you can go. I think you can go online to get your tickets if you want to do that in advance. But you can also just walk up, as we did today, and just buy your ticket and get on board.
All right, Laura Ingle, thank you very much. Great report.
It's very cool. Thanks.
2020 candidate Joe Biden is looking to cement his front-runner status. How will he do that? And could the trying of being inevitable backfire? Power Panel slides in next. Pelosi's warning that Democrats must own the center lane to beat President Trump. Two 2020 candidates are suggesting they should prosecute gun owners who refuse to give up their assault weapons. Is that too extreme for a party trying to win back the nation?
I think most Americans agree that these weapons of war should not be on our streets.
And it was on fire. And there were two males standing there, and it turns out they're students here. But I walked up to them and asked them if anyone was in the car, and they said, yeah, and I just went to work. I feel great about it. I did. Honestly, I cried after I got out of the car.
President Trump, the additional $4.5 billion he's requested for emergency border funding, saying there is, in fact, a humanitarian crisis at the border. I want to bring in Alfonso Aguilar, former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship under President George W. Bush. Also recently in one of those meetings held to talk about immigration that included senior White House advisor Jared Kushner. So Kushner's been working on this for several months. What are some of the things that you know of from being in a room with him are important to put in this legislation that they'll pitch?
Well, I think he told us he was asked by the president to look at the immigration issue, but from a broad perspective. So I met with him in January, along with a group of other experts and different groups. And we talked about everything, really. Certainly the need for border security to strengthen the security of the border, but at the same time, the need our economy has for foreign workers. Right now, we have about 7 million unfilled jobs because of our strong economy. Unemployment is down to 3.6%. We have 6 million workable guest worker program that allows companies to bring in the foreign workers that we need. And that's important not only for corporate America, but if we're not able to fill those jobs, it's very difficult for us to create good paying jobs for Americans.
No, it's interesting. What you're talking about is the flow of productivity. And so you've got to keep that up. But so what do you say to even some Republicans, like Senator Tom Cotton? They don't like this idea. They say H-2B worker visas on that. He says allowing an additional 30,000 seasonal workers into the country forces Americans to compete for jobs against non-citizens who drag down wages. What do you say to Senator Cotton?
No, I disagree. And frankly, Senator Cotton is in a minority in Congress. I've met with a large group of Republican senators and Republican members in the House, and they don't want to cut legal immigration. Frankly, if migrants are not taking jobs away from Americans or depressing wages. They're taking jobs Americans don't want or for which there are no Americans of working age. So they're usually taking jobs in the poles of the labor market, even jobs that require advanced degrees or so-called unskilled jobs. But again, by ensuring that we have that we're able to fill those jobs, we create jobs for Americans in the middle. All right, good-paying jobs.
Yeah, and you know, you have all of this because of the booming economy right now that's creating jobs at such a huge clip. Let's get to the New York Times editorial board. They've been criticized in the past for maybe not chiming in and seeing this as an emergency. However, they've done some great reporting on women who said they pay with their bodies to get into America across the... So now the Times is calling for Congress to give President the money for border security.
Well, Harris, sad to say, don't get your hopes high with the New York Times. While they say they want Democrats to support this to vote for this funding request, they still don't believe this is a national security crisis. They say it's a humanitarian...
You don't think so, even with some of their reporting?
Right. They're saying it's a humanitarian crisis. They don't realize that when you have hundreds of thousands of people swarming towards our border, trying to enter illegally, that's a national security crisis. Look, I agree that the majority are good people, but within those groups of people trying to enter the border, there's a significant group that are criminals, sex traffickers, and for the life of me, I don't understand why the liberal media and Democrats don't want to accept that. They don't want more funding for detention beds. What they want is for people to come here, for us to detain them, and then release them into the community. And we have a significant percentage of people, 20 to 40%, that don't show up for their court hearing. Imagine if this year we have 1.2 million people trying to enter illegally, we would have about 400,000 that would just go into our communities without status and not show up for their court hearing.
So
That's
it's
not
interesting, the words that are different here: national security, humanitarian security. Some might even say, or humanitarian crisis. Would it matter what you call it if the president just gets his